Welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast, hosted by Dave Roberts. Humanity possesses a unique skill, the ability to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. This podcast embraces that ability, offering learning opportunities through conversations with extraordinary guests. Dave aims to leave a positive mark on individuals around the world. So before you dive into today's episode, please share this podcast with your network, including friends, family, and colleagues. And please consider leaving a rating or review. Your support makes all the difference.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, and today it is my pleasure to have as my guest Shannan Kym. Shannan Kym is an internationally award-winning author, TEDx public speaker, certified professional life coach, and transformational mentor. After breaking free from the grip of alcoholism and childhood abuse, she found her purpose to share her life story and help others unravel their past, overcome the genetic blueprint of addiction and abuse, and find their own greatness. She lives in Alberta, Canada. Shannan, welcome to the Teaching Journeys podcast. It's a pleasure having you on the program today.
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me. It's a real pleasure.
And we got to give a shout out to Portia Booker. Portia Booker is the person that introduced us. Portia is just a beautiful soul, a great podcast host, great producer, and she felt that there would be alignment for a podcast episode with us, and we had a really great pre-call, and we find ourselves here today recording our episode. So I'm excited to get going.
Mm-hmm.
Shannan, my first question for you is tell our audience about the major experiences that have shaped your life path and your life passions today.
I grew up in a household up here in Canada where addiction, mental illness, and abuse was normalized. I am the youngest of 8 children. And it just so happened that when I was about 2.5 years old, my father ended up committing suicide. But prior to him committing suicide, my father was very much an alcoholic, and he physically abused my mother and all of my siblings. Along with that addiction to alcohol, he had severe mental illness. So when he ended up committing suicide, what ended up happening is my oldest brother basically took over his role. That was where my abuse started to come in. And he continued to abuse my other brothers and sisters as well. Now, growing up in a family like that, my mom never, ever protected any of us. She never told us that she loved us. And so the environment was not safe at all. We were always in fight or flight mode. And I don't blame my mother for that because that was what her normal was. And, she was also beaten down so low as well. So when my father was abusing my other siblings, how could she protect us? But then it got to a point too, when my brother took over the role, she could have easily protected us then. But she never. She became numb to it is what it was. That was just her normal. And it took me many, many, many years to get over the resentment and the anger that I had towards her because I could never understand why she never stood up for us, protected us, especially from my brother, because she did have the power against my brother. But, he was exactly like my dad. And then, so growing up with that, I became a people pleaser and a chameleon at an extremely young age. And my escape in middle school and high school was always being at other people's houses, like my friends' houses. I really became very, very athletic. So those were my coping mechanisms back there. And where I came into the realization that my family wasn't normal was when I started interacting with my friends and their families. And I actually seen what other families were like. They were telling each other that they loved each other. They showed emotions. They expressed their feelings. There was touching. They were hugging and everything. I never had any of that. I didn't know what any of that was like. And then, so that was where I really, really started to come into myself. And became so shameful of my name, where I come from, who I was, all of it. So then I started binge drinking when I was about 14 years old. And then my drinking slowly progressed throughout the years. And because you are who you attract, and on a subconscious level, I didn't realize that I didn't like myself. I didn't love myself. I didn't respect myself. So what ended up happening was I ended up attracting like attracts like. So I started attracting people into my life that treated me exactly how I felt about myself. They disrespected me, they hurt me, they abused me, and what ended up happening is I did end up marrying a narcissist. And then as the years went by, me being married to, a narcissist, I kept on thinking to myself, once the businesses are built, he's going to pay attention to me. He's going to love me. But those days never, ever came. And what ended up happening is that was when I really hit my rock bottom. It got to the point that I was drinking, not every day, but very, very often. I would drink up to 6 bottles of wine a day. And people would say to me, Shannan, how did you drink that amount of wine? And it was because I made my own wine. I had an endless supply. I always had a flask that was brewing for me to bottle. So I could easily hide the bottles. Financially, I could afford it. And it just got to the point where I would get up at 6:30 in the morning and I would start drinking all day long. And then I would have an afternoon nap in between 1 and 3 o'clock. And basically that was my pass out time. And then I would get up. We had 4 children at the time too. So I would be running all over with the sports and everything with my children 7 days a week. And it was finally, it got to the point where I just could not do it anymore. And I had a girlfriend that I hadn't seen, for quite a while, but her and I were like best friends. Her and I were friends ever since grade 2. So she knew me better than I knew myself because she actually was a psychiatric nurse. And so she worked with mental illness and addiction on a daily basis. So when she came, she was passing through my city and she decided she wanted to stay the night. And when I got the phone call from her, literally, Dave, all I could say to myself was, I just have to hide my drinking for 1 day. That's all I have to do. And she's never going to know anything. And then so she came to visit me. And after a while, it didn't take her long, only a couple hours, because she knew me. And she was like, Shannan, are you going to kill yourself? And that was when I completely surrendered to her, Dave, because I knew that if there was anybody that was going to help me, it was going to be her. And I trusted her and I loved her. She was like my sister. She was the closest thing to me. And I looked at her and I said, yes, yes. Because my husband wasn't helping me. He was sweeping everything under the rug. He was literally blaming everything on me. And I had been talking to him years prior that things got to change. I need to start to feel noticed. I need to be a part of this marriage. Because in our marriage, it was him, the business, his family, the children, and me. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't take it anymore. So I was numbing my emotions and all of my feelings with this alcohol. And every time I brought up, my feelings and emotions, he would literally just disregard me. So it was like me literally talking to a wall. And I wanted to make the marriage work. And I didn't know where to go from there. I had been taking counseling and all of that, right? But he was in such denial as well. But that's what narcissists are like, right? And I'll be honest with you, I didn't even realize that he was a narcissist at that time. So I ended up going to a top treatment center here in Canada, and I was there for 9 weeks. During those 9 weeks, I did not have one visitor. My husband did not come and visit me at all. To him, it was more like, get her out of the way. Just get her out of the way so he could continue living his life. And I got one phone call a week. So I would phone home to see how the kids were, and I would get a chance to talk with the kids. But when I would talk with him on the phone, I was dismissed very much so. right? Because everything was all about him and his work. And then, so I was there for 9 weeks, and then I came home. And then that was when, I started to set my healthy boundaries. That was where I really had to take control of my life. So I set healthy boundaries. I no longer hung out with people that drank alcohol. I pretty much stayed in a bubble. Do you know what I mean? At my house, I continued doing the sports things with my children. My focus was me and my children. And I had said to my husband, I said, because he told me he wasn't going to stop drinking because it wasn't his problem. I was the problem. And I said to him, if you don't want to quit drinking, that's fine. I said, but leave the alcohol away from this house. I don't want the alcohol in the house. But that wasn't an option because when his family came over, they would drink, right? And I'll never forget the one time I'd been out of treatment for probably about 3 weeks. And his mom and dad came to come visit us. And she's finishing off her bottle of wine. And she's pouring, the bottle is being emptied into her glass. So she pretty much had that bottle of wine under her belt. And she looked at me and she goes, Shannan, how are you doing? And I said, I'm doing really well. And she goes, well, somebody like me would never end up having an addiction. And I looked at her and I'm like, you've got to be kidding. Because his family is all high functioning alcoholics. Mm. Every event, there's always alcohol. They can't socialize without alcohol. And so I'm looking at her and I'm thinking to myself, why? Why would you say that? Are you saying to me now that I'm dirty and that I'm not good enough? That was when I really started to open my eyes to how they truly looked at me. Mm-hmm. I also thought too that because they were wealthy and because they had status, that they thought they were better than everybody else. Because why else would anybody make a comment like that to me? Mm-hmm. Then I quit drinking for a year and I really, really watched, who I was around and stuff like that, right? Because my sobriety, I really had to protect. Huh. Then it was a year to the date that I had quit drinking and we were at a family wedding down in New York. And once my husband is around his family, you need to understand that me and the children no longer exist because he's all about his family. So once we got to this wedding, we were disregarded. He couldn't wait to get out of the hotel room quick enough to go be with them and socialize and drink and all this other stuff, right? So I really felt that we were abandoned. So I was looking after the kids at this wedding, the 4 kids. And he was doing his thing, making himself look good and everything else, right? And there were so many triggers that happened with me. Like I had triggers of abandonment, insecurity, that I wasn't worthy. Like all of these just came rushing to me all at once, right? So what ended up happening is I started drinking that weekend. I started drinking secretly. And I ended up hiding my drinking for about 6 months. And then what I ended up doing is going back into my old patterns. I started having, my old drinking buddies come back into my life. So now I was again living in that life of self-destruction. And then I did that for approximately, I would say about 2 years. Then I was starting to have suicidal thoughts. I was really starting to gain the weight again, like just everything, right? And then it was on August 17th of 2019 was when I woke up that day. And that was when I literally asked myself that question, Dave, like, how in the hell did I get here? Like, I'm a good person. I know that I'm a good person. And how could I let things get so freaking bad that I am now at the state once again where I am giving everybody else my power and I'm ready to kill myself. And I was just like, holy shit. And I was so sick and tired of just doing everything for everybody else, Dave. I was so done. I was sick of living this complete lie that we had a perfect marriage, that everything looked great on the outside. We had 4 beautiful children. We had this beautiful home. We had these successful businesses. I was wearing all of these brand name clothes. I was driving a platinum Escalade. Everything looked so good on the outside. But you shut that door and it was absolute shit. There was no love in that house. I did everything I possibly could to try and keep it together, but no matter what I did, I was rejected. And I was just so tired of playing that role. And so that was when I really started to take control of my life. I had tried to do AA, but I did not like AA because they keep you in that identity of you are an alcoholic for the rest of your life. And I wasn't going to carry that with me. Like that was my past, and I knew that was the thing. So I totally quit drinking. My last date of drinking was August 16th. And August 17th was my true awakening where I never, ever touched a drop again. And I have not since then. But that was also when I decided to, like, I'm the only one that can change things in my life. Like, I come from a family of addiction, mental illness, and abuse. My ex-husband, he comes from a high-functioning alcoholism within his family of narcissists. And I was like, who's going to save my children? Who is going to save my children? Because he doesn't see anything at all. So it really had to start with me. So that was where I really started to have my healthy boundaries. And so then what ended up happening with that is I started actually working with one-on-one mentors. After that, I actually started to invest a lot of money in myself. And I chose mentors that focused on personal development and mindset. And I looked at somebody that could help me with my future. What were my goals in the future? And to help create those goals to come true, gave me tools. I had tried therapy, but they could only take me so far because the therapist had not experienced anything that I had gone through. So they're textbook therapists. And I get that and I understand that. And I totally appreciate the therapists that had me, but they also kept me locked into my past. They would keep on talking about my past and my past and my past. And I'm like, oh, for God's sakes, you can only cover my past for so long. Like, give me something that helps me get to the next step in my future. So I ended up no longer going with therapists either. And that once I started working with mentors like life coaches and stuff like that, that had actually gone through what I had gone through, totally changed my life. Then what ended up happening is I ended up writing a book. It literally took me about 3 months to write it. One day, Dave, it was on a Sunday, I can remember grabbing my computer and I just sat down and I just started to write. And it was literally like it was being channeled out of me. After I was done my book, I read it. When I completed reading it, I was like, oh my goodness. Did all of this really happen to me? Like, was I abused as a child? Did I marry a narcissist? Did I lose a baby? Why did I have all these tumultuous relationships with all these people in my life? Like, there was just shit upon shit upon shit in that I had endured. And then came to the realization, this wasn't normal. What I had gone through, like, I truly believe that all of us have a story. And we learn from our mess, and our mess matters. It was like, you know what? All of this stuff happened to me because I truly am meant to help others out there. And I knew that. So I also had that little voice inside of me that said, Shannan, put your book down, because this was now June. I wrote it in March, started writing it in March, and I completed it in June. And there was that little voice inside of me that said, Shannan, put the book down. You're not getting it published yet. What I want you to do now is to just sit back and be in your stillness and really look what's going on around you. And of course, that was my God talking to me. So that's what I did, is I sat back and I really paid attention to my friends, my family. I really looked at my environment. And that was when I really started to ask my questions. How are these people treating me? Are they respecting me? Are they disrespecting me? Are they being nice to me? Like, just everything you can imagine, I was asking these questions. And another thing too is I didn't talk near as much, because as a people pleaser, you're out there, you're doing everything for everybody else. You're constantly talking, you know what I mean? I didn't this time. I actually really sat back in my silence and in my stillness. There are so many things, Dave, that I discovered that I did not like. And I was like, most of these people didn't even like me. I realized that Kerwin's family, they did not respect me at all. Kerwin didn't even respect me at all. And I was like, wow, like, do I even like them? Why would I let these people talk to me like this? I got rid of all of my friends because they were all just my drinking buddies, right? But a lot of them too, just as soon as they knew that I quit drinking, they no longer talked to me anymore, right? Because our relationship was all based around alcohol. And I realized with family members too, it was so much more easier for them to have the damaged alcoholic Shannon because then they could get away with stuff.
Yep.
So when I started to set my healthy boundaries, they did not like that at all.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
then that was when I started to really see, are they in alignment of where I want to go? Are they supporting me or are they really holding me back? And they were holding me back. And a lot of them were so embarrassed for the fact that, people knew that I had went into treatment center. And I was like, that was the best thing I could have ever done. You guys should have supported me when I was in the treatment center. Like I was sick, you people, right? But it was an embarrassment because it was a reflection on them because now they were so worried what people were going to think about Shannan. She was in the treatment center and right? But I didn't care. I had sat in my stillness for all of June, July, August, and then September was when I could hear that voice again in me say, pick your book up and reread it. So that's what I did is I picked my book up and I reread my book and there wasn't hardly anything that I changed in it. And then that was when it went off to the publisher. And then it was the following March 8th of 2022 was when I had published my book. And that first book was called How in the Hell Did I Get Here? Right? Because that was the question I asked myself. And forever changing the genetic blueprint on addiction and abuse. And that one actually won an international award. And so once that book was published, that was when the shit really hit the fan. I'll be honest with you, because I spoke my truth in that book. I talked about my whole entire life story, my addiction, my abuse, my marriage, but it was all written in love because it was me unveiling everything about my truths. It was all about how I felt about myself, how I was so insecure, how I didn't love myself, respect myself. I had all this shame. But not so much my family. Well, half of my family said my book was a total lie, which I don't know how they could say that for the fact that it was my story. But they didn't want to have to face the truth about themselves, that they were abused as well, right? And I get that. They're on their own journey. But my husband's family they were embarrassed. They did not want anybody to know anything about my life at all.
Well, and too, alcoholic families keep secrets. They don't want those secrets going outside of the home. And so you brought that out there and you exposed them. And so they became vulnerable.
Yes, absolutely. And another thing too is once that book came out, that was when I really realized who was supporting me. And that was when I literally cut off my entire family and my husband's entire family. I wanted nothing to do with them at all anymore because they were causing me stress, anxiety, everything. And of course, what is most important thing that I need to protect is me and my sobriety. And I also was on a journey now to protect my children because all of my nieces and nephews are, they've got an addiction or some sort of mental illness. And it's trickled down into my family. And I can very much see that happening on my ex-husband's side of the family too. So that's why I had to do that, to protect that part of me and my children.
Well, and you mentioned changing the genetic blueprint too. We talk about epigenetics and it's obvious from listening to your story that there was generational trauma, first generation right on down with alcoholism and mental illness.
Absolutely.
And until that cycle and those rules that govern those systems get broken, that's going to perpetuate and continue to future generations. So once you decided, I'm going to break this cycle, that changed the genetic blueprint.
It totally did. It totally did. And that was the best thing I could have ever done. And then as I progressed, as the months and years went by, I really did try and work on my marriage. I was still working with life coaches. And I'll be honest with you, I still work with a mentor. I'm going to work with a mentor for the rest of my life, right? Because we're human and you always want to get to that next level of being that greater version of you. So then, yeah, so I ended up, telling my husband I want a divorce. I ended up moving out. Now I'm creating my own life. I've written my second book now, and, which is Find the Answer Within You, the 10 Pathways towards Self-Discovery. I coach people, and now I am a professional speaker, and I go on stage, and I'm on stage all over now, and I'm booked for 2026, and I tell my story, and I teach people about the 10 pathways to self-discovery and how they can implement that into their lives. And I have never been more happier in my entire life. And I have not taken anybody forward from my past.
Yep.
The only thing I brought forward is me and my 4 children and my best friend that helped save me. Everybody else I've released and I let go. And I'll be honest with you, Dave, so many people are like, how did you do that? And I'm like, you know what? I had to do it. When I transformed totally and completely, I mean I transformed totally and completely. My friends, my family, my environment, I left all of that behind and I created everything all brand new. And now the people that are in my life, they love me, they support me, they are inspiring me, they can see where I'm going, and they're doing everything they possibly can to get me to the next level. And that's what I love about my life. Like, it is so full of love and support and success now too, right? Like, it's unbelievable.
Well, and you created that when
Yes.
you made that decision on October 17th, 2019, that this has got to stop. I need to take care of myself. I need to break the cycle for myself and eventually for future generations. I wrote down a couple notes as you were telling your story. What came to mind is something John Bradshaw, who's written a lot of books on codependency, said, hockey players don't play with chess players. We tend to align with individuals who
Yeah.
know the same rules. And you grew up with a certain set of rules that governed and normalized the dysfunction. So it was natural that you were going to find somebody that understood the same rules, and you were attracted to a narcissist. And the chameleon piece, I'm thinking to myself, boy, that chameleon piece probably has served you well because it taught you how to survive chaos.
Yeah.
But you had to be a chameleon to avoid, you had to tell the abuser, when it was especially your brother, that what he wanted to hear, so you could not be abused or mitigate the effect of the abuse. And you had to do whatever you needed to do to survive, and you needed to be whoever you needed to be at that moment to do that. And the other thing with AA, as a former addictions counselor, Shannan, I talked to individuals who did not align with the 12-step philosophy of AA. It wasn't working for them. And I think I never bought into the fact that because you identified yourself as a recovering alcoholic or an addict, that you had to continue to go to AA meetings for the rest of your life. Plus, a lot of the clients that I worked with were younger individuals who couldn't wrap themselves around the God concept of AA. So they needed something, an alternative, like secular organizations for our sobriety, rational recovery, things that would focus on what's on coping skills and modifying those beliefs that kept us stuck so that they could move forward in their lives. And it didn't require that they attend meetings for the rest of their lives. So, traditional AA, traditional therapy didn't work for you, but mentorship and other options did work for you. And that's what we need to be responsive to as therapists and as coaches. And I'm just glad it worked. I just congratulate you on now close to 7 years of sobriety now,
Yeah.
and being able to make an impact. And through your story and through your experiences, I think it's great that you have progressed. And the thing is that alcoholism is so stigmatized and addiction is so stigmatized, and everybody says they focus on those individuals who didn't make it. Yeah, there's many individuals who didn't make it, but there's many individuals like yourself who did make it. And that's what
Yeah.
we also need to look at as well, to those who made it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And it was so funny because me and my daughter, we were just chatting last week, and I just out of the blue, I was like, can you believe it's going to be 7 years that I have quit drinking? And she's like, wow, Mom, like, I'm so proud of you. Well, the first year anniversary, second year anniversary, and then you get to the big 5-year anniversary, right? And now it's like really become really a part of my past. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah, like the anniversaries don't mean that much anymore because that's in my past, that it was just kind of like, I had to sit and think there for a second. It's going to be 7 years, you know? And I said to her too, I go, I can't even imagine having another drink. Like to be so free, to be able to get up when you hear music and dance, and just be free and not feel that you have to have that glass of confidence. You know what I mean? And I go, it is the most freeing thing ever to get up and dance and just move and be so confident and just feel your feelings and your emotions. That's what I love about where I am now. I want to feel my feelings. And that's why so many people, like, that alcohol is not the problem, right? The alcohol is just you're numbing what the real problem is. You have to get to the root of the problem. That's what people don't understand. They're like, oh, and they think that the alcohol is the problem. No, it's not. You got to dig a little bit more deeper. That's the coping mechanism.
Yeah.
So, but, people don't want to see that either. They're like, there's nothing wrong with me. Yeah, there's actually a lot wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
Why are you suppressing your feelings and emotions? That's what you need to be confronting. It's not you picking up that drink. It's the step prior to that.
When people start drinking, it's either to achieve pleasure or more so to escape pain, whether it's emotional pain, physical pain. And those are the two reasons that people develop an addiction. The other piece that I think needs to be recognized is that you were sober for a year before you decided to embrace sobriety full time. And that tends to get lost because with addiction, part of the stigma, I think, is we look at it as an all or nothing disease. That either you're sober or you're not sober, but it's what happened in between. I've talked to individuals, Shannan, who had 2, 3, even 20 years of sobriety and they relapsed. Doesn't mean we throw that 20 years out the window now. It's like, what did you do in those 20 years that were successful to maintain sobriety? And how can we carry over some of that success to what's going on now with you, to this current re-embracing of recovery? So, it's just, there's a lot of nuances to addiction. It isn't just an either or black and white situation where we need to look at the spaces in between. So I also want to get into your book, Find the Answers Within You, 10 Pathways Towards Self-Discovery. What would you like readers to take away from it? What are the major takeaways for them?
The major takeaways from it, well, I'll tell you a little bit about my book. So it was so funny because so many people had said to me, because not only did I transform my life, I transformed like my looks, everything. They see me back then up until now. They're like, oh my gosh, like you don't even look the same. Like, how did you do that? And so many people asked me that. And it was like, I could not explain it to them at that time. Because what I was doing is I was actually going through my 10 pathways that I talk about in my book to self-discovery. I was actually going through my 10 pathway process. So after I was, that journey, those 10 pathways I had embodied, that was when I could start to talk about it. And so that was why I decided that I was going to write my book. So what I did, my book is a 3-part book. So I rewrote my whole entire story in the first part of my book. Then the second part of my book is how I healed myself. And then the third part is the 10 pathways that if you follow these pathways like I did, and if you embody them, that will totally change your life. You will be able to implement those into your life on a daily basis. And this is just not regarding, alcoholism. This is literally every area of your life. If you want to increase your finances, your relationships, your business, all of it, these are the pathways that are going to help you. And they're living proof because I'm the living proof, because I follow these pathways on a daily basis. I live and breathe them, I talk them, I walk them, I speak on stage about them. And then so it's the whole transformation of what I went through. So I had my awakening, right? I realized like, holy, how in the hell did I get here? So I talk about that whole process. Then I talk about me sitting in my stillness, what I had to do to sit in my stillness, all my experiences. And then I talk about my responsibility of taking charge of my life now where I want to go, but then also taking responsibility for all of my past. Then I talk about forgiveness, not only forgiveness of myself, but also forgiveness of everybody else. Then I talk about what is it that I want, because most of us do not know what we want. 9 out of 10 people do not know what we want. So what we do is we end up living that hamster wheel of life, right? We get up in the morning, we go to work, we come home, we eat dinner, we watch Netflix, we go to bed, we do this day after day, month after month. People think that that's living, right? But it's not. You're actually limiting yourself. You're living in scarcity. You're not going after your dreams. You're not going after your goals, and that 10th person vaguely knows what they want, but they don't know how to get it.
Mhm.
Or people don't think that they're worthy enough to create these dreams and goals, right? So I talk about the wanting, and I talk about vision, and you have to have that vision of what you truly want. So I go through all of these pathways, right? And I talk about them, how I experienced them. So that's what my book is all about. It's a 3-part series. So I focus now on stages as I really speak on identity, because of the different identities that I had to go through and shift through to become the identity, the person that I am today. A lot of people don't understand identity because people think that identity is just a personal trait, but no, you're creating your identity is actually a skill, right? You have to create that person that you want to be. But the only way that you can do that is you need to know what you want. You have to set that goal. And then once you know what you want, then you create that identity through all of your skills to become that person now. And that's how you gain you gain that greater version of you. So my next book is I really want to get into the identity aspects of it. Whenever I decide I'm going to sit down and write that one. But the good Lord above will tell me, Shannon, it's time to sit down now and start writing. So yeah.
Or the good Lord above will give you a break in your speaking schedule so that you can
Yeah.
you can do that. So
Yeah,
but
exactly.
the thing about identity is continually evolving. And you're right, it isn't a trait. It's something that our identity is continually shaped by the experiences that we have, either good or bad. And then
Exactly.
and that identity is going to continue to evolve as our experiences change, as we embrace new possibilities. And I think it makes it more fluid. It makes it more of an evolving process.
See, a lot of people don't realize that shame is an identity. And
Mhm.
how many people out there carry that identity of shame? And they're not going to come into that realization of that shame identity they're carrying until they actually truly look at themselves. They look at themselves within, and then they realize what is holding them back. That's where shame comes in,
Yep.
right? And people don't understand what triggers truly are. But triggers are unhealed emotions within you that need to be healed and brought forward. And once you confront those triggers, that's where the freedom for you really begins. And the only way you're going to come into those triggers is when you sit in your stillness. Because what's the first thing? Take COVID for an example. Oh my God, how many of us had to actually sit in our stillness during COVID? Most people couldn't handle it. But most people, what did they turn to? Because all of these triggers came up that they didn't want to deal with. The domestic violence, the alcoholism, like the statistics just rose, right? It went crazy because people were too afraid to sit in their stillness because of all the triggers that were happening. So many people I know in my industry, they loved that aspect about COVID because then they could really sit in their feelings.
Mhm.
Those that really wanted to confront them to become that greater version of who they are.
I think sitting with ourselves is one of the toughest things that we can do because sometimes we're our own least best friend, and all of the voices in our head that tell us that we're not worthy of success, that we need to be ashamed of who we are, and that tends to amplify,
Mhm.
which is why it's so important to rewire and rework those voices in our head so that we are thinking of ourselves with more grace, with more forgiveness, and with, just realizing that we're not as bad as we were made out to be or we're told that we were.
Right. Yeah,
And,
exactly. Exactly.
and it's, your story just exemplifies all of that in terms of the effect of the early childhood experiences. And early experiences do matter. what happens to us early on shape what happens to us later on. And your story is really illustrative of that. I'm just so grateful that you were able to work through it and you're doing what you're doing now, and that, but more so, you're happy with you. But there's another question I wanted to ask you about your transformational mentorship program. I know that's part of what you do with coaching. Tell us about that. Who are most likely to request mentorship services, and what do they hope to accomplish by working with you?
So I work with women from the ages of 40 to 60 years old, because as women, we are givers, right? We're nurturers. We take care of everybody else. And then one day they wake up like I did. And they do. They're like, how in the hell did I get here? Because they've totally lost who they really, really are. And they don't know what to do. They're unhappy. Lots of them are empty nesters now. So everything that they had been living for their entire lives are now have walked out the door and don't need them anymore. And a lot of them are looking at their husbands and they're thinking, why am I still with you? Now, same questions of me sitting in my stillness. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of these women, they need help. They don't know where to go. They don't know what to do. They've lost their dreams. They don't have any wants. They were exactly where I was. So these are the women that I help. And I help them to create the life that they want by asking them the first question, what is it that you truly want? And then from there, I help them to create their identity. And then from there, I actually help them to take action steps. And I've got courses anywhere from 3 months to a year where I will help them transform. And I work with them one-on-one, and I guide them and I teach them through all of my experiences that I've gone through. They have to become vulnerable. We also look at how their belief systems came about from past generations. Why are those beliefs there? Do you actually believe them now? And are they working for you? Because lots of times they're not working for them,
Yep.
right? So we have to create new belief systems, and something that's been drilled into them all those years. It takes a lot of work, and I teach people to truly love themselves like I said, by having their awakening. They're having their awakening when they're coming to me because they're like, how in the hell did I get here? I don't know what to do now, right? So I take them through all the steps of stillness, responsibility, forgiveness. What do you want? What do you see for yourself? Now let's create the identity. I help them to create a new environment to get that greater version of them. And like I said, I live and breathe everything that I do. And I incorporate that into other people's lives. So then they can gain their own 10 pathways, as well too. And it's the most beautiful thing when you see women transform. Absolutely, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're right. They're traditionally givers. They're the caretakers. They take care of the kids. They take care of their spouses. They take care of their families. And it is empowering to see when they begin to step into themselves and say, I need to take care of myself now. And I need to come into the person that I was meant to be.
And my big pivotal moment too, Dave, also came. There was one day where a friend of mine, he was a year younger than me, had passed away. And so I'm 57 now. I just turned 57. So this would have been, I think I was 55. No, I was 54. And he was 53 when he passed away. And I just thought to myself, oh my goodness, like this guy hasn't even lived. He's been living in lack and limitation his whole entire life in scarcity. And I said to myself, you are not going to live like this anymore. You're going to go out and you are going to start living the life that you want. And that was when I really started to make big changes. And that was actually when I really decided I wanted a divorce, because I am living in lack and limitation. I am still being controlled here. And I am 54 years old. I got a whole life still ahead of me. There are things that I want to do and I want to accomplish. And if I stay in this environment, there's no way. If I stay in this relationship, there is no way that I can go forward. So I came to that big realization, and that was where it was like, no, I need a divorce. I need to get rid of all of this, of my past. I need to move forward. And I'll be honest with you, that was the best thing I could have ever done. But I had also was at that point too, Dave, where I had worked so hard on my marriage. And so when I asked for that divorce, I was ready because I knew it wasn't going to change. And I had done everything I possibly could, knowing that, oh, Shannan, you know what? You did everything. You did the right thing, and now it's the right thing just to walk away.
Yep.
And also, I left him with everything. Like, when I left, the only thing I took was me and my children's clothes. I didn't even take a fork because I didn't want to carry that energy going forward into my new life. And I'll tell you, when I drove backed out of that driveway for the very last time, the freedom I felt was unbelievable. I felt so free and I felt so happy and I had no regrets. And it was the most beautiful thing I've ever experienced. And I'll tell you, I will remember that moment for the rest of my life. And that's how I knew that it was right and I was being guided by my God. Yeah.
And I think when you embrace sobriety, you embrace a drug-free living, you walk away from those people, those places that no longer see your value, and you gravitate to those individuals who do and who are going to support who you are and what you want to become. And I'm glad that you found that for yourself. And I got a couple of more questions for you before we conclude today. The first kind of going to be a surprise question, Shannon.
Okay. I like
So
surprises.
perfect. But my question for you is, if you could orchestrate the perfect day for you, what would that perfect day look like?
Okay. You know what? I have a lot of perfect days. I'll be honest with you now. So my perfect day is waking up at about 6 to 6:30, and I go and I hit that Nespresso button on the coffee. So I've got my coffee and it's frothing, and then what I do is I actually sit down every morning and I journal. I journal on my affirmations of what I want to create in the future, and as if I've already got them now. So I write out my affirmations 3 times each, and I've got, I think, 8 different ones. So I write them all down. And then what I do is I actually say them out loud. And then what I do is I go into a meditative state and I talk to my guides and my angels, and I actually visualize what my future is going to look like. And then I always put white light over me and my 4 children. I visualize us. I'm going to cry because I love my kids so much. And so I visualize me in the white light with my 4 children, and we're hugging and embracing each other, and we're telling each other how much we love each other. And that is very special to me. So I do that every single day. And then after that, I start to get ready, and I will always go to a spin class or a yoga class or whatever. I try and I work out every single day. Then I come home and I get ready for the day, and my afternoons are usually filled with either coaching, podcasts, lots of podcast interviews, or else I'm on Zoom, constantly creating, my next step, my action step to learn going on stages or whatever. Like, there's always something going on. And I putter around my house and I'm doing this and I'm doing that. Like, I'm totally in the environment that I love being in. And I travel a lot as well too. So I really enjoy when I am at home. But you know what? I got to say, like, I truly love my life. And my kids are at that age now too, where I can actually bring my kids with me to my speaking events because they're really starting to understand who I am and get to know their mom, like the new mom. And then for them to see me on stage and get to know all these beautiful, amazing colleagues of mine. I was just down in Scottsdale 2 weeks ago. I took my oldest daughter with me to a multicultural women's speaking event. So she got to see me there. She started to meet some of my colleagues. And then we flew back up to Canada. I had to unpack, repack, and then I took my second oldest daughter with me down this last time. So she got to experience what it would like as well too. So what I do is amazing because my children can be incorporated with it. And there's like, I'm taking them to levels that they would have never had if I would have stayed in my old life. Like the opportunities that are happening with my children now too, it's totally opening up the doors for them. So my kids, like, I don't believe in lack and limitation. If you're going to do something, get out and do it. And I'm going to support you 100% wherever I can. And you can really see it where it's taken my kids. Like, so say, for example, my youngest, he's my son. I've opened up the opportunity for him to actually become a Formula race driver. He's only 16 years old. And he's been asked to be on a very well-known racing team in the States. And that was because I had the opportunity now to create that life for him, where I would never have had that opportunity if I would have stayed in my marriage, right? If you want to do something, man, I'm telling you, I'm going to be there to support you. all the way, you know? And so like I look at all the different areas of the children with their successes. Do you know what I mean? And I'm so excited. I'm so excited for all of us. So I have many perfect days. I can't tell you that I've got just one. I've got many perfect days, and there's so many more to come. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how this all plays out too, and how it continues to play out for you. So, Shannan, my last question for you is if people want to get in touch with you, find out about your speaking events, contract for you as a speaker, purchase your books, what's the best way for them to do that?
They can go to my website at shannankym.com. That's there. They can see my book. They can see my speaking events. I got my speaker demo, like all my programs, everything is on there. And then you can go into all the socials, and it's all Shannan Kym on all of my socials all across the board. The only thing you really got to remember is how you spell my name. In my name, it's 2 A's, not O's. So it's Shannan. And then Kym is not the traditional way of Kim, it's Kym.
Yep.
So that's, my name is pretty easy to figure out, but you can find me absolutely everywhere. And I would love to have a discovery call with anybody out there who is really resonating with me, and just see where I can take you to the next level.
Sounds good. I'll make sure all of your contact information gets in the episode notes before we go live. So, Shannan, thank you so much for a wonderful conversation today. I truly enjoyed it. And maybe in the future, when you get a break in your speaking schedule, we could do this again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everything, Dave.
You're welcome. And with that, that's a wrap on another episode of the Teaching Journeys podcast. I'm your host, Dave Roberts, wishing you peace.